Good afternoon, bees. Let's decorate some Santa and kids cupcakes. Come join me. I started off with rolling out some fondant for some white kids. These will be accompanying our Santa. So I am using a round cookie cutter here, and I'm just cutting out the base of what will be the face of our kids. After I finished with our white kids, I rolled out some brown fondant so that I have some faces for some diverse kiddos. After I finished that, I started to roll up some balls that will function as the noses for our kids. I will do some both brown kids' noses and some white kid noses. After I was finished with that, I went to rolling out some green fondant, which is going to be the color of the hats that our kids will be wearing. And again, I used that cookie cutter to cut out some round circles that I will use to make the hats. So once I finished that, I cut out like a moon shape for each one of these round pieces, and that moon piece will function as the hat itself that will go on our kiddos. I then cut out a rectangular piece of fondant, and I'm cutting that piece into quite a few smaller, thin rectangles. These will function as the rim of each one of the hats. So once I had those all cut and in place, I used my bench scraper and just kind of did some light lines on each one of these, about 3 lines on each one. And then I'm going to take a pair of tweezers and I'm going to pinch along each one of those lines. And I'm doing that because that really kind of looks like what it would look like around a hat. So some crochet or some knitting, and that's the design that we'll use for our hats. So once I finish that, I'm attaching the rims to the hats. So I'm using a little bit of water and just kind of rubbing it along those moon pieces and then attaching the rims to the hats. After I have that finished, I'm just cutting off the edges that go too far off of the hat so that our rims look more appropriate for the hat. There I'm just using a little bit of powdered sugar so that these don't stick to my surface. Now I am taking some of the excess green, and to complete our hats, we're going to put some balls on top of the hat. So I'm rolling out little balls of green fondant that I'll use for the hats. Once I had those ready, I used a little bit of water and attached each one of those balls to one of the hats. And then with that, our hat is completed. So of course, the next step is to put the hats onto our kiddos, which will be our next step after the hats are done. And so to do that, I'm using a little bit of water on a paintbrush and I'm attaching them to each one of the kiddos. Now I'm going back and I'm attaching each one of those noses that I rolled out a little bit ago, and I'm using a little bit of water with the paintbrush and putting it onto the face and then adding the nose. And now I've taken some black fondant and I'm rolling that into some tiny little balls, and they're going to be the eyes for our kiddos. So after I had those rolled out, I am going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to use that to attach the eyeballs to each one of the faces. So I'm adding the water, and then I'm using one of my fondant tools, and I'm just picking them up and adding them to each one of the faces. You can see they're really starting to come together at this point. Now that I have the faces put together, I need to create a mouth for each one of our kids. So I'm using a fondant tool and I'm just kind of tracing into each one of the faces a smirk or a smile onto their faces. And here's what my kids look like. You'll notice I painted some pink cheeks, so we have rosy cheeks. Now I'm moving on to decorating my cake. So these are going to be Santa. So this one is a white Santa. So I'm using some peach icing, and this will be the base of his face. And after that, I'm going to use a little bit of black icing, and I'm going to draw his mouth onto his face. Now I'm beginning to work on his hat, so I'm covering that in with a bag with just a coupler. There's no tip there. And I'm drawing that piece that kind of hangs down on a Santa's hat. Now I'm doing some tiny rosettes along the face of my Santa for his beard. And I'm doing the white along his hat. And then I'm also going to add a couple more here, and I'm adding a mustache. So you can still see his mouth. Now I'm going to make his eyeballs and his big bulbous nose. And so with that, Santa's done. So I'm going to finish up these cupcakes. I'm adding just some icing with a star tip, no specific kind, onto each one of the cupcakes. And then I'm going to take one of each of our little kiddos that I made, and I'm going to add them onto these cupcakes. So there you have it. With that, this one is finished. And I'm going to move on to making one of our diverse Santas. So you see here, I'm going to repeat the process. I'm creating the base of his face, and I'm using a brown or a dark tan icing to make his face. And I'm going to draw that Santa's hat, clean it up a bit so it's nice and smooth looking. I'm going to add that piece that hangs down over the face and kind of smooth out the joint there. Get rid of that extra point that came from pulling the bag away. And I'm going to begin to finish his face. I'm adding the small rosettes for his beard. Forgot to put his mouth on, so I'm going back and just adding his mouth in there, and then going to resume putting my beard on. That extra big bulb on the end of the hat and the stuffing around the hat itself. I'm going to make his eyeballs with some black icing, going back to the white to finish up his beard. Here I'm going to draw his mustache, and then I'm going to add his nose again. On this one, because there's a bit of space between his forehead and his hat, I'm going to add some eyebrows and some white dots in his eyes. And here we have our Santa done. So again, I'm going to use some icing and just put it onto each one of these cupcakes so I can add one of our, add our kiddos to each cupcake. Then the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm making just a 4-pack of cupcakes that will have 2 white kids and 2 minority kids in, and that will complete this video. So thank you so much for coming and joining me. This was a fabulous video. I enjoyed making these cupcakes a whole bunch. So I encourage you to like, comment, share, and please come back again to see my next set of content that will come within the next day or so. Here's our white kids. Here's our brown kids. And here's our mix of kids. Please come again. Like, comment, and share.